අද්විතීය 200 Mbps ස්පීඩ් එකකින් ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ වේගවත්ම සහ පුළුල්තම හෝම් බ්‍රෝඩ්බෑන්ඩ් සම්බන්ධතාවය වන SLT Mobitel දේශීය ෆයිබර් බලවේගය ඔබත් අදම අත්විඳින්න.
හරිම සුදුයි.
Tonight, on First at 9 this Sunday, the 17th of September 2023. The 78th UNGA Session. The President arrives in New York to attend the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Restructuring. All government authorities engaged in environmental conservation to be restructured, says Senior Advisor to the President on National Security, Sagala Ratnayaka. Money laundering. Sri Lanka's money laundering and terrorism financing risk rated at medium, says the CBSL. Meanwhile, top-level delegation from the Asia-Pacific Group visits Sri Lanka.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක. Rhino Cement Roofing Sheets. හොඳම මිලට කල් පවතින වහරයක්.
This is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to AdaDerana First at 9. I'm Aditya Drisingha joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. Now in your top story tonight, President Ranil Wickremesinghe arrived in New York earlier today to attend the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly following his participation in the G77 and China Summit in Cuba. The 78th session themed Rebuilding Trust and Reigniting Global Solidarity, accelerating action on the 2030 Agenda and its sustainable development goals towards peace, prosperity, progress and sustainability for all is scheduled to take place from the 18th to the 21st of September. Under the theme Rebuilding Trust and Reigniting Global Solidarity, accelerating action on the 2030 Agenda and its sustainable development goals towards peace, prosperity, progress and sustainability for all, the summit will gather from tomorrow to Thursday the 21st of September. President Ranil Wickremesinghe will address the session on the 21st of September where he will deliver a special speech. Additionally, President Ranil Wickremesinghe has been invited to deliver the keynote speech at the Indo-Pacific Island Dialogue for Maritime Nations and has scheduled bilateral discussions with several state leaders participating in the conference. The international body is expected to discuss a plethora of issues grappling the world in recent times. The leaders will discuss wide-ranging issues such as sustainable development, climate action, international cooperations and global health. Within this, the ongoing war in Ukraine, instability in the continent of Africa and recent natural calamities that have disrupted the world are some of the topics that are expected to garner the most attention. Furthermore, the President will actively participate in the 2023 Sustainable Development Goals Summit, where the global leaders will outline strategies for transformative and accelerated actions towards 2030. The summit will mark the halfway point to the deadline set for achieving the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. It will be the centerpiece of the high-level week of the General Assembly and will respond to the impact of multiple interlocking crises facing the world. In 2015, countries adopted the Sustainable Development Goals and agreed to achieve the 2030 Agenda to promote prosperity, address inequalities while protecting the environment. The 17 SDGs offer the most practical and effective pathway to tackle the causes of poverty, violent conflict, human rights abuses, climate change, and environmental degradation. Now, meanwhile, a decision has been taken to restructure all government authorities engaged in environmental conservation in a bid to ensure that Sri Lanka's scenic natural environment, which attracts tourists from all around the world, remains protected. Speaking at an event held yesterday, Senior Advisor to the President on National Security and Chief of Presidential Staff, Sagala Ratnayaka, outlined that a committee will be established for the purpose of restructuring those government entities.
In a bid to celebrate the International Coastal Cleanup Day and the Marine Resources Conservation Week, several cleaning programs, awareness programs and seabed cleaning programs were organized by the Marine Environment Protection Authority in 66 locations targeting beaches and lagoons. Accordingly, a program to clean the artificial beach in the port city was held yesterday under the patronage of Sagala Ratnayaka, Senior Advisor to the President on National Security and Chief of the Presidential Staff.
සංචාරකයන් ආකර්ෂණය කරගන්න අවශ්‍ය පරිසරය අපි හැම අවස්ථාවෙම රැකගත යුතුයි. එක පැත්තකින් ආයතන කීයක් තියෙනවද මේ සමුද්‍රීය පරිසර ආරක්ෂණ අධිකාරිය තියෙනවා, වෙරළ සංරක්ෂණ අධිකාරිය තියෙනවා, ඒ වගේම පළාත් පාලන ආයතන ටික තියෙනවා, නාවික හමුදාව උදව් කරනවා. ඒක ඒගොල්ලෝගේ වගකීමක් නෙවෙයි නාවික හමුදාවේ. නමුත් උදව් කරනවා. ඒ වගේම ශ්‍රී ලංකා සංචාරක මණ්ඩලයේ මේ වගේ වගකීම් පැවරෙන රාජ්‍ය ආයතන තියෙනවා. මේ රාජ්‍ය ආයතන නැවත ප්‍රතිව්‍යුහගත කිරීමක් කරන්න අපි තීන්දුවක් අරගෙන තියෙනවා. ඒ වෙනුවෙන් අපි කමිටුවක් පත් කරනවා. ඒ ප්‍රතිව්‍යුහගත කිරීම කරන්න අවශ්‍ය නීති තවත් ශක්තිමත් කරලා දෙන්න. ඒ වගේම සමගාමීව ගරු ජනාධිපතිතුමා කාර්යසාධන බලකායක් පත් කරනවා.
Now, meanwhile, Export Development Board Chairman Dr. Kingsley Bernard said that the Sri Lankan government is working on securing free trade agreements as part of making the country's economy more export-oriented, and discussions are being held with China, India and Thailand to secure comprehensive agreements opening paths to export services as well. Meanwhile, President of Sri Lanka's Coconut Milk Manufacturers Association, Ranjit Malalsuriya, said that the government institutes must be empowered with the decision-making power to drive key initiatives in order to see a rapid development in the export sector of the country. Speaking to Indivari Ammuatta during our current affairs program at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24, industry leaders and officials discussed the way forward for Sri Lanka through high exports.
So what's really the forecast for our export products?
Tea and rubber and also apparel, we need to improve our exports. Right? So if you take the benchmark as 2022 figures, so we would like to at least get 10%, 15% increase over the last year. But as I mentioned earlier, the problem is mainly external market conditions. Now, we can't just say, therefore, the exports are down and we can't keep quiet. We have to look at alternative approaches, how we can improve that. Now, if you take the apparel sector, the Joint Apparel Association are working very hard on this with the authorities like EDB and BUI and other organizations involved in that. We are looking at, say, vertical integration of the industry, because the textiles, we are not self-sufficient in textiles, and government is going to set up a textile park in Erau. Then tea sector also, I think, as Ranjit mentioned, the hub concept. Now, tea sector also, there's two thoughts of school where some say we need to get tea from other countries and blend here in Sri Lanka and export. Then there is another school of thought to say that we are the orthodox tea producing country, therefore we have to have our identity, own identity. So these are right now being discussed, argued, debated. So at one stage we have to take a decision on those things. So if you want to use the hub concept, we need to have more tea and export. So when you take apparel industry, now the government is busy making arrangements with other countries in setting up free trade agreements. FTAs. Then the government is going to have comprehensive free trade agreements without limiting only to the goods. Now, if you take the India-Sri Lanka free trade agreement, it's at the moment it is only for goods. Now, the government is going to expand it to become a comprehensive agreement. Likewise, with Thailand, we are going to have a comprehensive agreement. Then China, we are going to have a comprehensive agreement. So these are certain ways where the government is taking initiative to see that these exports we can bridge the gap between this declining trend of export.
What more do you require in terms of an industry to improve and be a major player in a hub status?
One of the things we feel like, industry point of view, such institute need to be empowered more, because it cannot, sometimes the coordination beyond, they need to have authority to execute certain things. So, I mean, if you really want to make Sri Lanka with more exports, so you need to have one entity or few entities who's driving key initiatives. I mean, same thing we were asking from the government on the coconut sector, because if you look at coconut, as I explained earlier, coconut has about good 60% local consumption, which need to be catered without a doubt. So then balance, how are we going to distribute it, and what is our focus? So we need to get this focus right, and then every organization in every institute, policies need to be aligned on that focus. Sometimes we see that focus change time to time. So we, because this is a good time for us to be focused on exports, get the entire supply chain, entire the policies and everything aligned, because we have a real need at the moment. So where EDB is playing a role and can play a bigger role if you can that such institutes being empowered of taking some of the decisions. So that's what we see from industry point of view.
Now, Sri Lanka's overall money laundering and terrorism financing risk has been rated at medium as per the national assessment done by the Financial Intelligence Unit of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. This was revealed by the Financial Intelligence Unit of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka via the publication of the sanitized report of the 2021-2022 National Risk Assessment on Money Laundering and Terrorism Financing. The Financial Intelligence Unit of Sri Lanka published the sanitized report on the 2021-2022 National Risk Assessment of Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing, which was developed based on the assessment conducted by the Financial Intelligence Unit of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, together with public and private stakeholders. The National Risk Assessment identified drug trafficking, bribery and corruption, customs-related offences including laundering of trade-based proceeds as the most prevalent predicate offences, where money laundering threat was rated as medium-high. Fraud, robbery, environmental and natural resource crimes were reported to have a medium-level money laundering threat. Human smuggling or trafficking, tax offences, illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing-related unlawful activities were assessed as having a medium-low-level money laundering threat, while lower threat was observed for counterfeiting of currency. Further, the assessment identified the money laundering risk of the financial and designated non-financial businesses and professionals. Further, the assessment identified the money laundering risk of the financial and designated non-financial businesses and professionals. Accordingly, in the informal money remitters sector, the risk is high. In the real estate sector, banking sector, and in finance companies, the risk is medium-high. Money value transfer service providers, stockbrokers, primary dealers, casinos, dealers in precious metals and stones, notaries, and lawyers were reported to have a medium-level threat. Meanwhile, accountants, trust and company service providers and insurance service providers were observed to have a medium-low-level threat of money laundering. The Financial Intelligence Unit said a strong political commitment is critical to address the national anti-money laundering and counter-financial terrorism plan. It was also stated that by better understanding the current risk environment, respective stakeholders from now onwards can effectively allocate more resources to high-risk areas to safeguard the integrity of Sri Lanka's financial system. Now, meanwhile, on the same topic of money laundering, the Asia-Pacific Group on Money Laundering said that Sri Lanka needs to prioritize 10 activities in order to successfully prepare for the mutual evaluation by the Financial Action Task Force and avoid the adverse economic consequences of being grey-listed. The Asia-Pacific Group said each of the 24 stakeholders, including the Financial Intelligence Unit of the Central Bank, are expected to ensure that they made every possible effort within their capacity to address the gaps in the anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism framework in a timely manner to face the country's third mutual evaluation due in 2025. The Asia-Pacific Group of Money Laundering is one of the main regional monitoring bodies of the Financial Action Task Force, committed to monitoring and guiding the member jurisdictions in effective implementation of the international standards to combat money laundering, terrorism financing and proliferation financing associated with weapons of mass destruction. In response to an invitation from the Financial Intelligence Unit of Sri Lanka, a high-level delegation from the group visited Sri Lanka to engage with local authorities and provide them with crucial insights regarding the upcoming mutual evaluation of Sri Lanka's anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism framework. Sri Lanka was identified as a grey list country with strategic deficiencies in its anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism framework twice by the Financial Action Task Force in 2011 and 2017. During the 2017 grey listing, the European Union also blacklisted Sri Lanka for non-compliance with these international standards. In 2019, Sri Lanka was able to exit the grey list after addressing the gaps in the legal and institutional framework. Sri Lanka's third mutual evaluation is scheduled in 76 weeks in March 2025. It is important that Sri Lanka achieves technical compliance with the Financial Action Task Force's 40 recommendations and ensures that the country's framework delivers expected results. The actions recommended by the group includes focus on effectiveness, enhanced monitoring, timely legislation, resource allocation and interagency coordination. It further said enhancing the capacity and active involvement of prosecutors in money laundering and terrorism financing cases, bolstering implementation by the law enforcement agencies, improving the capacity of the judiciary for timely and effective adjudication, encouraging active involvement in the private sector and strengthening and focusing on international cooperation, recognizing its pivotal role in demonstrating effectiveness is also in the recommendation list. The group said by adhering to these prioritized actions, Sri Lanka can secure a favorable outcome in its upcoming mutual evaluation and avoid the adverse economic and financial consequences of being grey-listed by the Financial Action Task Force. Now, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit pointed out that the newly appointed committee to investigate the Channel 4's allegations will be useless, as majority of the recommendations brought forward by the Parliamentary Select Committee, which was previously appointed, were not executed accordingly. The Cardinal particularly drew attention to the individuals named in the Parliamentary Select Committee's report. The 125th Jubilee celebration of the St. Mary's Church in Kaluthara was held under the patronage of His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit today.
මෙදා පාස්කු බෝම්බ ප්‍රහාරයට අසු වෙච්ච ඒ 273 දෙනා වෙනුවෙන් මා මේ කිය යුතුමයි. දැන් මේ රටේ නායකයා තීරණය කරලා තියෙනවලු මේ සම්බන්ධව වෙනම කොමිටියක් පත් කරලා channel 4 නාලිකාව පෙන්නපු වැඩසටහනේ ඇති කරුණු විග්‍රහ කරන්නට. මම අහන්න කැමති අපේ රටේ නායකයාගෙන් එදා පාර්ලිමේන්තු තේරීම් කාරක සභාවක් පත් කරලා මේ නායකයාම තමයි මේ තේරීම් කාරක සභාව පත් කළේ. ඒ තේරීම් කාරක සභා වාර්තාවේ 134 වෙනි පිටුවේ සඳහන් කරලා තියෙනවා මෙන්න මේ අහවල් පොලිසියේ උසස් නිලධාරියා මේ සිද්ධිය සම්බන්ධව තාමත් බරපතල වගකීමක් දරන කෙනෙක්ය කියලා. ඒ නිසා ඔහුව නීතිය හමුවට පැමිණෙවිය යුතුයි කියලා අද වෙනතුරු මොකද්ද වෙලා තියෙන්නේ? ඒ උසස් නිලධාරියා තාමත් පොලිසියේ එම තනතුරටත් වඩා උසස් තනතුරක් දරමින් ජීවත් වෙනවා. තවත් තේරීම් කාරක සභා තවත් කොමිටි පත් කරලා මොකද්ද තියෙන තේරුම? මේවා ඇවිල්ලා ඇස්බැන්දුම්. මේ රටේ නායකයෝ හැසිරෙන ආකාරය ගැන ලැජ්ජා සහගතයි.
For the latest in the world of business, join us on the other side of this short commercial break.
ගොඩමඩ පෙරලි කරන බලපුළුවන්කාරයා මහින්ද්‍රා යුවෝ ඩීමෝ වෙතින්. වැඩම ගොඩයි ගොඩම තමයි ස්වරාජ් ට්‍රැක්ටර් ඩීමෝ වෙතින්.
Welcome back. Now in your business news, Sri Lanka's Purchasing Managers Index for the month of August rose to an index value of 49.3 from 44.6 in the month earlier. The service sector PMI for the month of August, meanwhile, showed an index value of 57.6 in August 2023, indicating a continued expansion in services activities.
The Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index showed an increase in August 2023, recording an index value of 49.3. The central bank said, considering the sub-indices, new orders and suppliers' delivery time increased during the month, while production and employment remained contracted. The overall increase in new orders was mainly driven by the manufacture of food and beverages sector in response to the continuous downward revisions in retail prices. Further, employment remained contracted in August as well, while stock of purchases remained unchanged on a month-on-month basis. Meanwhile, suppliers' delivery time lengthened during August compared to the previous month. On a global level, the manufacturing PMI recorded a value of 49 in August 2023, with an increase of 0.4 index points from July. Manufacturing PMIs of China, India, Singapore and Russia improved at a higher pace in August 2023. However, manufacturing PMIs of the Eurozone, the UK and USA deteriorated in August 2023 compared to the previous month. In the services sector, PMI recorded an index value of 57.6 in August 2023, indicating a continued expansion in the services activities. New businesses increased in August 2023 compared to July 2023, particularly with the increases observed in financial services, wholesale and retail trade, other personal activities, professional services and education subsectors. Business activities continued to expand in August 2023, showing positive developments in several subsectors. Meanwhile, backlogs of work decreased, yet at a slower pace during the month. On the global level, services PMI posted 51.1 in August 2023, signaling an expansion in global services activities. Services Purchasing Managers Indices of China, India, US and Japan indicated that their services sectors expanded in August 2023 compared to the previous month, while services PMI of UK indicated a deterioration in their services activities.
Now, representatives of the Colombo Port City's Economic Commission said food stalls at the Colombo Port City will be removed by March 2027 during a recent meeting of the Committee on Public Finance. Meanwhile, Dialog Agiata PLC was awarded with the prestigious Excellence in Digital Inclusion Video Award for its exceptional use of mobile technology in digitally advancing the nation. With that, let's take a look at our corporate news segment for the day. In response to the questioning of the Committee on Public Finance on the legality of the establishment of food stalls whilst the Colombo Port City was designed mainly targeting foreign investments, members representing the Colombo Port City's Economic Commission stated that the food stalls at the Colombo Port City will be removed by March 2027. They further said that the food stalls fall under the leisure activities. This was stated during a recent meeting of the Committee on Public Finance as the committee addressed the regulations under the Colombo Port City's Economic Commission Act No. 11 of 2021, scheduled to be presented in Parliament on Tuesday the 19th of September. The GSMA M360 APAC 2023 Awards honoured Dialogue Asiata PLC with the prestigious Excellence in Digital Inclusion Video Award for its exceptional use of mobile technology in digitally advancing the nation, as exemplified through the National Fuel Pass Initiative. The Fuel Pass Initiative was developed in collaboration with partners Millennium IT ESP and ICTA under the guidance of the Ministry of Power and Energy. Dialogue's submission on the National Fuel Pass won the Excellence in Digital Inclusion Video Award for its contribution for mobile technology towards digital inclusion in the advancement of digital transformation in the nation. An industrial culinary training facility at the National Apprentice and Industrial Training Authority in Anuradhapura was inaugurated by the Australian High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, Paul Stevens. The facility is expected to serve as a hub for nurturing aspiring chefs, providing students with industry-recognized skills training, qualifications and job placements in hotels and kitchens. The institute is also expected to pave the way to high-income generation potential in hotel kitchens and restaurants, helping meet demand across the tourism sector. Now in your international business news, the US Federal Reserve is not expected to increase interest rates at its meeting from the 31st of October to the 1st of November, while experts have predicted that the US Central Bank may enhance its economic growth forecasts during the forthcoming policymakers' meeting. Additionally, according to Goldman Sachs strategists, the Fed will cut its estimates for core inflation and unemployment for this year by a combined 0.4 of a percentage point, bringing down both estimates to 3.5% and 3.9% respectively. Goldman Sachs strategists yesterday stated that the Federal Reserve is unlikely to raise interest rates at its 31st of October to 1st of November meeting, while also forecasting that the US Central Bank would lift its economic growth projections during the upcoming gathering of the policymakers. As market participants try to gauge the Fed's monetary policy trajectory, some big investors, including JP Morgan Asset Management and Janus Henderson Investors, have said the central bank is likely done hiking rates following the most aggressive monetary policy tightening in decades. Futures tied to the Fed's benchmark overnight interest rate were factoring in a 98% chance that the central bank would leave rates unchanged at the end of the 19th to 20th meeting this month. As per the data yesterday, the odds for the policy rate, which is currently between 5.25% to 5.5%, staying unchanged at the 31st of October to 1st of November gathering, stood at roughly 72%. Goldman strategists further added that the upcoming year could see gradual rate cuts if inflation continues to cool. They also said the central bank could raise its estimates for this year's growth to 2.1% from 1% when policymakers update their economic projections on Wednesday, reflecting the country's resilience. Goldman strategists also expect the Fed to lower the estimate of this year's unemployment rate by 0.2 of a percentage point to 3.9% and reduce the estimate for core inflation by 0.4 of a percentage point to 3.5%. And with that, we wrap up tonight's edition of AdaDerana First at 9. Stay in touch with us on www.adaderana.lk for the latest developments around the clock. Thank you. Have a great night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.